Stephanie, Susan, Vicky, Kristen, Preston. Oh, Kelly, welcome from Oklahoma. Fantastic. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We had about 30 people signed up for the webinar. We only have 11 here, but I suppose that's par for the course for us. But we'll go ahead and begin because I know our time is precious, and we definitely want to move forward and make sure that we're getting everything in we want to get in. So really, thanks again for being here. This webinar, of course, is connected to Inquiry, and it's one that will provide a general overview of the inquiry-based model. We are going to have some upcoming webinars that will explore questioning within the inquiry model and other areas of relevance in the work of great social studies educators across the great state of North Carolina. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen we do have a link to our wiki, and I'm just going to take you there now so you can see where this PowerPoint will be once we're all done with this, and where you will find a couple of the resources that we're going to be using today. So if you see, it's ssnces.ncdpi.wikispaces.net. Go there and I'll show you where it would be. So we go here, and then all of the resources relating to this will be right here under Social Studies Webinar Series. And we have a reading for today, which of course I'm sure everyone did. And the Buck Institute video, which we're going to be playing for you today, and just give you a heads up, if the video does not seem to run properly, or this lovely system we call streaming, then you can go ahead and just play it from your computers at your end through the YouTube link we've linked for you there at the screen. This is definitely a session where we want to encourage participating. Comments, we have a couple people who are monitoring the questions, and so we definitely want you to ask questions and contribute and take part in the discussion. So let's go ahead and do some introductions. Most of you guys are all familiar with us. We have our section chief, Faye Gore, who is at another webinar right now, and then we have our consultants, who will say a happy hi. We got Ann Carlock. Justin Knox, who is currently doing her CNA training. You have me, and I am Steve Maceda, and then we have the wonderful Michelle McLaughlin.
Good afternoon.
And we have our great program assistant, Bernie Cole. All right, and so these are the folks who are here to serve you in social studies across the state. Now, our objectives for the session: to discuss quality instruction in the social studies, some of which should be familiar for you, introduce the inquiry portion of the C3 framework, which hopefully some of you guys are familiar with, discuss the importance of and research base for inquiry in the social studies, and discuss the implementation of inquiry-based learning in the classroom. Let me give you sort of a little example of how it might look in the classroom. So, let's go ahead and talk about what makes for quality instruction in the social studies. Now, this might look familiar to folks who attended our recess sessions this year, because we talked about this at the start of those sessions. We know quality instruction is meaningful and authentic. It has to have purpose. It has to have meaning. All right? It's really supposed to get into depth and focus on what matters in the democratic society that is America and where students are going in the future. Right, so you want this to be meaningful and authentic. As we'll talk about, inquiry will really get to that meaningfulness and that authenticity. Right? You want it to be integrative. Subjects that comprise social studies are integrated into each unit or lesson, and the strength of inquiry is that integrative nature. You want it to be active. Active lessons require students to process and think about what they're learning, and you can't get much more active than actually exploring a question that is relevant to student lives. Of course, value-based is also a significant element. You want a curriculum that expresses values that embodied our democratic form of government. right? Justice, equality, freedom, really reflecting in many ways the approach of John Dewey way back at the turn of the last century. And he argued that this really should be the focus of social studies in general and education in particular. You want teachers that are aware of their own values and how those values influence their teaching. It's so very important. You know what? Inquiry ties to that because the questions we explore are often tied to our own values and perceptions of those values. And you want students to engage in experiences that develop fair-mindedness, simulations, critical thinking, decision-making, so on. Basically, again, tying back to the authenticity and that meaning. And, of course, challenging. And you can't get much more challenging than really considering a deep, thoughtful question. All right? Any questions anybody have on anything we've talked about so far? You can answer them in the comments or in the questions box. And if there are no questions, we'll move on. I'll give you a second to process. Thank you all again so much for coming. So I'm assuming that there are no questions. I'm going to go ahead and ignore the little box that says I have 7 people that are not attentive right now, but that's okay. Yeah. All right. So, question is, what is inquiry? Inquiry is really defined as sort of the seeking of truth, information, or knowledge. It's a complex process that students are trying to convert information to useful knowledge through the structure identifying real questions, finding resources to gather information, answering the real question, interpreting the information, reporting the findings. And this is really tied so very deeply to the C3 framework, which we're going to talk about today, and to the inquiry model in general. Students are constantly refining, constantly exploring these real questions. It's really grounded in the writings of Dewey. Jeffrey Kaplan talked about Dewey's philosophy that really teaching and learning should occur in a classroom where true participatory democracy is practiced. This learning really prepares people to encounter life's problems through their constant interplay with the immediate world. And education is really about preparing students for life, all right? And education in itself is a key part of that life. And social studies, inquiry-based learning is a key part of that life. And inquiry-based learning has been around since the 1930s. But as we know, and as we see today, education is a cycle. And that cycle is coming right back around to that inquiry-based model of the 1930s. Right? And when social studies was born. So, what are some advantages of inquiry? Why should we do inquiry? All right, it really does have a number of advantages that we see here. All right, it's highly student-centered, highly relevant to students, focused on making connections to the real world, and really gives students freedom. But it's freedom within a specific guideline because they're still practicing basic skills, still exploring important content. Right? It touches students where they are and engages their learning styles. It's interdisciplinary because the most effective inquiry models use an interdisciplinary approach. It encourages collaboration among students. It works with any age group. Elementary school kids can do an inquiry project. Right? Middle school, high school, and of course college students are more than capable of this. And of course, very important too, and if you think about it, it's one of the most important elements. It really acknowledges students' funds of knowledge. It requires students to use what they know already and put that to use. Right? Now, just keep in mind, and one of the reasons that we're focused on inquiry in our webinars this year is that it really enhances instruction and brings in that third dimension we've talked about so much of thinking and learning. That's an element of social studies instruction in North Carolina. It can be integrated from the very beginning into a conceptual unit as a component of that instruction. And we're going to talk more about that a little later. So we're going to go ahead and talk now about the goal of social studies. And then Michelle is going to talk with us about connecting the inquiry model to the social studies concept-based framework. So what is the goal of social studies? Really, coming out from a variety of sources, a lot of this tied back to NCSS's own definition. It's engaging students in investigating significant themes and questions with people, their values, and choices as a central focus. Barton and Levstick talked about this in their work teaching history, and really focused too as well on active citizenship and learning. Meyerson talks about this, Seguis. And active citizenship is such a key component of social studies. Inquiry and action go hand in hand. Right? So the question we've thrown out there, and we'd like you to really take a second and respond in the question box and the comment box, is how might inquiry help us with these goals? So if you would, just go ahead and take a minute and think of an answer that you might have for us to share out. So let's just take a minute and respond. In this case, silence is not golden. I wouldn't an answer or two. I clap because those are some great responses and exactly what we were looking for. And this is why I love working with you guys, because you always come up with some really fantastic stuff. We don't have a lot of us here, but we have some good people here. We really appreciate the work that you're doing here and responses like that. Right, so our own work in North Carolina really does lend itself nicely to inquiry. As social studies educators in North Carolina pursue the goals of social studies. So let's take a few minutes and make those connections. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle. She's going to talk about connecting inquiry to the K-12 social studies concept-based framework.